Okay. Say now. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. This is the day we have been given. May we make the very most of it, starting now, together.
If you have a candle at home, please prepare to light it. And whether or not you have a candle at home, please say with me the words for lighting our chalice found in your order of service as I light the chalice here in the meeting house. This light burns also in our hearts,
and it lights our path.
And it lights our path towards harmony and justice and hope for all.
Our invocation this morning is by Cheng Jian, who was an 8th century Tang Dynasty Chinese poet. He wrote, "Here, beside a lake clear and deep, you live amidst clouds, where softly through pine trees the moon arrives to become your pure-hearted friend. Shaded by flowery blossoms, underneath a thatch roof hut, you rest, calmed by herbs that flourish in their bed of moss. Let me thank you for the time on Jishan Mountain with phoenixes and cranes." Which brings us to our time to greet each other. So, incredibly warm greetings from the First Unitarian Church of Providence. If you could see, all the tech team people are waving their hands behind the camera, and our vocalist is waving, Jen Nardone is waving. We've got everybody here holding this space for these few weeks that we've had to press pause again, holding the space until you're here. But we are with you so much in our hearts and in our souls. We miss you. We cannot wait to be together again with you. So the warmest possible greetings on this chilly morning from the First Unitarian Providence, and we hope you are sending them right back to us.
And we have this week's joys and sorrows. A candle of gratitude from Claire Rosenbaum that my son, his wife, and young family have pulled through COVID. Also, a candle of love and care for all the teachers who are giving their all and coping with COVID, even though they may have unvaccinated children at home. A candle of healing for Tom Blessington, who slipped on the ice and broke his shoulder yesterday. And lastly, a few of you have mentioned, a candle of hope and relief for the people of Tonga after the devastation wrought by volcano and tsunami. To prepare for prayer and meditation, I invite you to relax, to sit. Let your bodies be comfortable where you are. Let yourselves feel yourself present in the space you're in. Please take a deep breath with me. And again. And once more. Spirit of life and love, In our hungering for meaning, let us find truth. In our searching for peace, let us find justice. In our yearning for justice, let us find compassion. In our hearts' remembering of nature's ways and finer days, may we look deep within the mystery of things and find there grace. Amen.
We have two readings this morning. One is excerpt from Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, and the other from Wendell Berry. Cruelty is a mystery and the waste of pain. But if we describe a world to compass these things, a world that is a long, brute game, then we bump against another mystery. The inrush of power and light, the canary that sings on the skull. Unless all ages and races of men have been deluded by the same mass hypnotist, who, there seems to be such a thing as beauty, a grace wholly gratuitous. And from Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free.
It is remarkably cold these days. Brethren and sistren, it's been bone-chilling in recent days, and our theme this month is grace. And the two combine to take me back. Way back, about 24 years back, to where I lived during my very first years as a parish minister, and some of what I learned there and then. So it may seem counterintuitive to be talking about grace and nature when it feels so inimical outside, but there's actually a connection and a thread. It was another bitter winter when I used to live in a cottage on a farm in the Hudson River Valley, and a number of people rented apartments and houses on the property, which we shared, because it was a farm, with an assortment of dogs, cats, peacocks, chickens, pygmy goats, pigs, and horses who were kept by the people who lived there. One of the other residents was Tinker. He was an elderly bay horse belonging to the owners of the farm, and he had been a hunter-jumper in his day, but in his old age he mostly spent his time in the pasture at his ease. One day he developed colic, which is an intestinal condition that in horses can easily be fatal. The owners were away, and their vet was unreachable. I happened to be home for my day off, and so a friend from the farm and I spent all day working on him. Now, the most important thing when a horse is colicking is to keep him from rolling on the ground, which they do sort of like a very big dog. Horses naturally want to roll when their stomachs hurt as a way to try to dispel the ache. But if their intestine twists as a result of the rolling, the only treatment that can save them then is surgery, which in horses is usually prohibitively expensive. So you have to try to keep them from rolling, which with something as big and strong as a horse is really, really hard. I did my best, which meant walking Tinker around in the field for hours, always keeping him moving, never letting him stop and start to go down. But often I was alone while my friend was on the phone in her house trying to find some vet to come and help us. And eventually, Tinker got himself on the ground and rolled. It was January, and he was rolling on snow. About the third time he rolled, as he lay tired and still for a moment, I saw blood spotting the snow crimson. It was coming from his mouth. It was hard to tell whether he was bleeding from the throat or if he had injured his mouth in his throes, but either way, the sight of the tired, old, kind horse lying on the snow with that inward look that animals and people get when they are suffering made me sure we were losing him. Eventually, the vet came and gave him a treatment and injection to try to give him ease and time for the treatment to work. In 6 hours, we would know. Either Tinker would again be in pain or his digestive system would resume functioning. 6 hours passed, during which I walked him every hour to try to help get his gastric works going again. He looked around, interested and vital again on our walks. Gentle, his breath blowing beside mine in the winter air. About 5.5 hours after, when I checked on him again, he turned his head and looked at his stomach, a bad sign. Soon he was again in great pain, and now there was nothing more to do. The vet came back, and the owner finally came home, and I said goodbye to Tinker and went to my house, leaving them alone to put him down with an injection. Spring wound through, and it renewed us, and summer unfolded into long, green, hot days filled with the sound of insects, and then fall began to crisp the air at night. And one day, early in that autumn, I was working at the computer in my cottage when I heard something bang against the inside of a window behind me. Almost at the same moment, from the corner of my eye, I saw my 2 cats streak avidly through the room towards the window. And I turned around and I saw something move in a plant on the windowsill. And I went over and parted the leaves, and sitting on a frond was a tiny young black-capped chickadee with a wing twisted awkwardly behind him. I say him, I don't know. I experienced him as a him, and his beak was parted and his breast was heaving, and he was looking straight at me. I shooed the cats away, and I picked the bird up and took him far out into the upper field. I sat by a rock under a wild crabapple tree, and I looked at my handful. He was very small, with bright black eyes and very tiny, thick, short, dark eyelashes. He was still looking right at me, into my eyes, and panting, and I saw there was blood on and inside his beak. And I thought immediately of Tinker and the blood on the snow, and I wished this wouldn't end in death again. The bird didn't move or try to get away. He seemed perfectly comfortable there in my hands. After about 10 minutes, I gingerly began to try to ease his protruding wing into a position like the other, which was lying smoothly against his side. And he let me. And soon, at least the wing looked okay, but I was afraid it was hurt, perhaps broken. I tried lifting my hands to give him some impetus to make a try at flying, but he didn't move. He just sat in my cupped hands, panting less, looking at me and looking at me and looking at me. Slowly, he closed his beak. His breathing eased, and finally he ruffled his feathers and he settled his wings just a little. Still, he showed no inclination to move. And so after a few more minutes, I decided to stand up, thinking I would try to place him on a branch of the tree and see if he could at least hold on. And as I began to move, he burst out of my hands and flew himself right onto the branch where I was about to place him. He looked at me some more, and then he flew away. These two experiences are forever linked in my mind. The huge horse, the tiny bird, the one familiar and named and known to me, so powerful that finally I could not control him, and the other wild, fey, trembling, dainty in my palm. Both had dark eyes. Both were gentle in their pain. Both put up with my efforts to help. And the great strong one suffered and died. And the small, fragile one suffered and lived and flew away. Annie Dillard. Some of you may be familiar with her. She is a white contemporary American writer renowned for her reflections on nature and the sacred, and we heard her so beautifully read by our own Annie Bissett earlier this morning. Remember what she wrote about cruelty and grace? In particular, she said, we describe a world to compass these things, a world that is a long, brute game, with also such a thing as beauty and a grace, wholly gratuitous. Annie Dillard published her thoughts on cruelty and grace in a volume titled Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Beyond the coincidence of incorporating Tinker's name, her writing informs my understanding of the day that he died and also the day that the bird lived. Nature illustrates the human condition, that life is breathtaking in its heartlessness, but also in its beauty, and even in its beneficence. We have all felt the utter mercilessness of life. And we have felt it for ourselves, for those we love. We all know that sense of devastation, that the world is a long, brute game. We have all felt the shock and desperation at the fundamental unfairness of life in a world that we strive endlessly to order and make better. We have also all felt the different pain that comes not from chance or circumstance, but from malice. The intent of someone who wishes to give us hurt or who does not care enough to help us when we are suffering. There is the difficult reality that cruelty exists not only in nature and in life, but also in people who ignore or take pleasure in the suffering of others. Yes. But, we have also our experiences of extraordinary and utterly unexpected blessings and reprieves for ourselves and our loved ones. There is the compassion of those who do care for us, especially compassion that comes when we need it most or expect it least. There are strange and surprising moments of joy or laughter or love, beauty, a grace wholly gratuitous in the midst, sometimes, the very midst of great sadness or mourning. We are too often powerless over evil, but also we are freely given more beauty and moments of transcendence than we could ever dream of or create. And sometimes it is only that gratuitous grace that makes the cruelty of life bearable. Grace gives us solace and reminds us that the very nature of existence holds foundational reasons for hope. Wendell Berry, the marvelous Wendell Berry, also white, a contemporary American writer, one of our greatest poets, on the conjunction of spirit and nature. Remember his words from this morning? When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests his beauty on the water. I come into the peace of wild things. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, and for a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Wendell Berry's revelation reminds us of a different aspect of Annie Dillard's message, the essential relationship between humanity and nature in moments of cruelty and of grace. So many people, just one second. So many people express a deep sense of relief, succor, peace that comes with being immersed in nature. And this perception, you don't need me to tell you this, it goes back at least to the onset of recorded religious experience. Think of that famous line about the experience of peace and exaltation beside still water. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. The 23rd Psalm was written about 3,000 years ago. And the psalmist lies down in green pastures and walks beside still water, and his soul is restored across the millennia, across the planet, across countless generations, across races and cultures. That intimate connection between the human soul and our encounters with nature, binding up our raveled souls and filling us with awe, speaks to us all. Evie Shockley, the contemporary Black American poet, draws an even tighter circle around the religious human experience of nature in her gorgeous tapestry of a poem. I've shared it with you once before, you may remember it. You must walk this lonesome. Say hello to moon. Leads you into trees as thick as folk on Easter pews. Dark, but venture through. Amazing, was blind, but now fireflies, glittering, dangling from evergreens like Christmas oracles. Soon you meet the riverbank. Down by the riverside, water baptizes your feet. Moon bursts back in low yellow, swing low, sweet chariot of cheese, shines on in the river, cup hands and sip. What never saw inside, a peace. Be still, mix in your tears. Moon distills distress like yours, so nobody knows the trouble it causes. Pull up a log and sit until your empty is full. Your straight is wool, your death is Yule. Moonshine will do that. Barter with you what you got for what you need. Draw from the river like it is well with my soul. O moon, you croon, and home you go. The gratuitous grace. The canary singing on the skull. That's apparent only to human perceptions. We apprehend the presence and inevitability of death and suffering, and also the vitality and beauty of life, of bird, of song, not only the starkness and reality of their conjunction, but the potential and hope in their conjunction. And yes, nature also shocks and challenges us. Yes, the cold outside this week is nothing compared to the undersea volcanic eruption in Tonga, still unfolding, the wasteland of its passing still being discovered, its devastation still being learned and mourned. It shows us mystery and the waste, the terrible waste of pain. And at the same time, the world over, the world shows us also beauty, sights and connections that stream awe, shapes, colors, sounds, smells, textures like living water into our weary, parched souls. Animals and plants live and die and consume each other, yes. But also, sunsets streak the sky like fauve paintings, and lambs frolic and roses bloom, and seahorse and emperor penguin fathers nurse their young with anxiety and tenderness, and puppies and kittens exist. And not to be Pollyanna, but it's real. So it isn't Pollyanna to point out that so do rainbows and not unicorns, but dolphins and elephants and northern lights and mirror-like pools of still, cool, clear water. Nature is powerful, astounding, appalling, exuberant, and gracious. It is so many years since the day I tried and failed to help tinker. Since the day the bird flew from my hand. Even now, the bird's flight does not redeem or even lessen Tinker's loss or the desperation of that frozen, failing day. But it does stand somehow against it. I couldn't save the horse, but I could save the bird, and that comforts me. I know that even if it never worked, I would have to keep trying to save things regardless of the odds. But the bird story reminds me that sometimes it is possible. What an extraordinary gift. Sometimes we can save. In this frigid time, when the earth feels like rock beneath our feet, when all around us is frozen and gray, and life is so challenged in the world around us, when food is scarce and warmth is scarcer, when we fear for those who may have less, for the world which teeters every moment between unfolding promise and awful jeopardy, let us see the beauty as well as the harshness of the frosted world around us. Nature offers richly varied testimony to us. The testimony of winter and of global climate change, and also the enduring truths of life rising anew, of life adapting, of hope justified not by our highest human efforts and determination, but sometimes just by timing and luck and the fortitude of creatures and all that is beyond our efforts and control. The promise along with the peril, part of the mystery, is a grace wholly gratuitous. It costs us nothing. We cannot command it nor calculate it, and still it exists. As surely as it endures, it is not here for us. We are not its purpose, and still we are so served and lifted by it. This grace, the sights and sounds, the majesty and rhythms, every time we encounter them, every time we engage them, every time we yield ourselves to them. A lesson in itself. Every time we look and see what is around us all the time. For which I can say nothing more except amen. I'm so excited we have our choir member and church member Catherine Jameson together with Jeff Allard to sing a live offertory for us this morning for the Earth Forever Turning. This is our time to practice generosity, to reach out beyond ourselves and do something for others, in particular to support the life and the work of this beloved community, which depends upon you, every single one of you, of us, for its existence. Thank you so much for all that you do, all that you give, all that you are. Our invitation this morning is to celebrate with hope, great hope, that the rescheduled weekend with David Smith and Bethel AME Church has been set now for Sunday, May 1st. That means there will be an all-day rehearsal together on Saturday, April 31st, and then the performance in worship with music together and with the leadership of wonderful David Smith, who came and led it was something like a 75-person choir that morning. It was so remarkable. Will all happen that Sunday morning, May 1st. So please mark your calendars. Please make sure you are ready to come join us in the singing or come join us in the worship service. There is no requirement to sing in past lives, to be able to read music. The point is to sing together and let the music and the very special musical gifts of David Smith come and help us lift our souls and lift each other. So, like I said, mark your calendars. Sunday, May 1st is the service. Saturday, April 31st is the all-day rehearsal, and I mean all day, like 9 to 5, something like that. And there will be more information on this as we go. Our closing words are another reflection that really pairs, especially with our Invocation by Cheng Jun. It's the Lake Isle of Innisfree from the early 20th century and late 19th century poet Yeats, the Irish poet. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in that bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes, dropping slow, dropping from the veils of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray. I hear it in the deep heart's core.
Please join me. We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.